You look at the government right now, there are 29 members, of which 5 are black. You look at the government right now, there are 29 members, of which 5 are black.
But I find that very intriguing. He complains, you've complained for the last...
I'm not complaining. I'm just pointing out to your intrigues.
Well,
that's what I'm pointing out.
May I respond to the intrigues? What the problem is? For 30 years, you've been claiming there was only one Hindu in the cabinet?
None.
Good, none. And now you have 11.
Yes.
So where I went wrong?
What?
I'm just pointing out the fact that now we didn't have one.
Come on, man. The people can read and understand, man.
Let me go.
Look at you are spreading propaganda that the Hindus take over. We converting everybody. Even Jack, we converting.
Oh God,
we converting the speaker.
Come,
give me a break, man.
Jack. But let me make the point now. Let me make the point. The fact of the matter is, as I say, power changes. And that what we saw in the last election was the power, and I think that Assad is correct, that the PNM is an African-based party. The PPP is an Indian-based party. And that when you get power, you try to empower your own. Now, Assad real big in the dance now. Because in the whole dance, you have Anand, that's your boy.
How he could be my boy? He's my lawyer, the Mahasabha lawyer. He's no longer the Mahasabha lawyer. Yeah. He's the Attorney General now.
So
I had to find a new lawyer.
So let's stop talking.
No, you are making illusions. You see, I want to read your article and push it back in your face, you know. This is what he's saying here. Smash citizens' rights. Denounce his right to choose his political alliance. Deny him the livelihood and make him sure he's pauperized. To them, this is the essence of democracy.
Yes,
to who them? The Hindus? The present government? Give me a break. When you control the whole government, when you control the treasury, you had no complaints.
Yeah, let's get back to the point today that 17 of the top ministries, the most powerful, not sport and tourism, are controlled by East Indians. Sad complained about that when he was on the other side. In fact, SAC has a very powerful position now. We're calling the shots. Nice.
I am not calling the shot. Listen, man, why you must assume that I have time to engage in the daily politics? I am the Secretary General of the Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha. Hello. While you have not built a foul cube in Trinidad and Tobago to educate the people, we have 70 schools across the country. We have 175 mandirs. We have 250 pundits. We have 1,000 staff in our school system. Yeah. Can you say that you and your group have ever done anything to improve your community?
I must congratulate you about that. But
I must despise you. I must despise you for not building a foul cube for the African community.
No, I want to answer that. I want to answer that because it's a very fallacious argument. He's the head of a religious organization. Long before SAT was born, there were Hindus here, and they had their mandates. SAT is the continuation of a tradition. I am not a religious leader. I'm not the head of the Catholics.
You're not nothing because you have built a school.
And so
you're a professor.
Precisely because I'm nothing, I cannot build a school. Even though we've had a school. But the point is, what you take credit for is part of a tradition of which you've been born into.
Professor, what were you born into? You were born into Eric Williams. You were born into wealth.
You made a point a while ago about Mr. Maharaj being in now because he has friends in high places, as you assert.
So it were enemies all the time.
So does that mean that you were in because you were part of the PNM for a while, if the argument goes the other way?
No, I was never in, but
So then how can you assert he was in because...
Let me respond. And I think that any objective observer, when one looks at the relationship, if Sat Maharaj is the head of the largest Hindu organization in the country, and several associates and past associates are now in government, it is logical to assume his ability to be in contact with and speak to becomes enhanced. It's also, to begin with, I've known Sat for a long time. Sat has always been an advocate of multiculturalism. The very first or second day that the PM became the PM, she passed through his organization and announced what? We shall henceforth change the ministry from Ministry of Culture to the Ministry of Arts and Multiculturalism. Now, if there's no correlation there, then probably my logic and thinking is wrong. I am saying, I'm not making a bad statement or saying something's wrong with it. I'm saying that's how power goes. That if in point of fact, one of the big issues, say, with John Kennedy, what was one of the big points were against his presidency, he was a Catholic. And they were afraid that if he became the president, he would favor the Catholics. So it's always that correlation. Though to say that is not to malign, it's simply to acknowledge the influence of my dear friend.
You are vicious and you are devious. You are vicious, you cut across the truth, and then you are devious, you're trying to justify it. That's why I'm here today, though. That's why I called you the last time you were here, because you were telling untruths. He said, you know, when we were talking about multiculturalism, he said that Canada, it's okay. In Australia, it's okay, because you have indigenous people. We have indigenous people here too. You got rid of them. They disappeared. You have a handful now in Arima. We always had indigenous people. What justification you give for that? You know that the reason why Canada has to do it is because of indigenous people. He said that. Pick up the clip. And the reason why Australia did it is because they have indigenous people. But he conveniently closed his eye to the fact that we had indigenous people here and most of them have disappeared.
Just a point of clarification, though, Mr. Mirage. I think much of the destruction of the indigenous people cannot be blamed on the last 50 years or so. That would have happened a couple centuries ago. The work on that started.
But what did we do to preserve them? What was left of them? What did the PNM do to preserve what was left of the indigenous people? You did nothing.
Just by way of clarification, the coming of Europeans to the Americas in 1500, there were 60 million indigenous peoples. At the end of 1600, there were 10 million peoples. In fact, a fellow called Bartolomé Las Casas wrote a book called Tears of the Indian, or The Destruction of the Indians. That happened long before we came here. In point of fact, the three areas in Trinidad where there were Indians were moved up to Arima. They were a dying group of people long before we even got on the planet.
But all indigenous people are dying. That's why the United Nations made special regulations to preserve the indigenous people. They are all dying, not only who are in the Caribbean, all over the world. Indigenous people are disappearing.
My argument was...
Now your argument...
Gentlemen, I'm listening to what both of you are saying with regard to indigenous peoples in Trinidad and Tobago, but let's be brutally blunt here right now. Neither of you cared about the indigenous people in this country. You've both been so busy advocating for your respective groups that you ignored this very vulnerable group in the society. And in fact, some of what you were advocating for even marginalized them further. So how can you want to pretend to speak on behalf of indigenous people this morning?
You see where you are carrying the discussion? I refer to indigenous people here because he was justifying Canada and justifying Australia, and there was no need for that here because there are no indigenous people. This is what I am saying, not what you are saying.
But in a wider context, what she's alluding to is the fact that no one really put systems in place, either the so-called Afro government or the East Indian government, to protect the indigenous people in the country.
That might be true because we had to protect ourselves. Does the Hindus have to protect themselves against the people like my friend here?
Let's play another.
Why must there be this us against them rhetoric coming out all of the time? Why can't there be a sit down and collaboration discussion as you would have experienced at the level of the commission?
Listen,
why can't we have that model duplicated and replicated in the society?
This utopia.
And you guys are in powerful positions where you can set the trend. You can set the trend.
Let us get out of this utopia
and come back to reality.
And get back to reality. The fact
but we have the power to change the reality.
All I want to ask the question, answer it too.
Okay, answer.
Neither Sadowai or African people or Indian people were in charge of this country until 1955. We had nothing to do with what transpired prior to, in that that's what you meant by a colonial government. They set the rules. There are different rules for one group, different rules for another group. You may even argue they place one group against another. We can't be held responsible for that. But in an age of independence, we have to try to work through our differences. Now, to set us up as the defenders of indigenous people, it seems to me to be fallacious. That was not my argument. My argument was the reason why the question of multiculturalism was brought into Canada in the 1970s, I think under the Trudeau government, was an attempt to incorporate the immigrants, not indigenous peoples.
Let's pull the clip and see what you said.
Okay. The second one, of course, the same thing is true of Australia. They did a horrendous job on the indigenous peoples. And of course, after a whole lot of hue and cry, their multiculturalism was in effect an attempt to remedy that situation. My argument, where I disagree with Sat profoundly, is we do not need multiculturalism here. I'm saying long before you go back to as early as 1865, we have been living together. There have been multiple languages. That's why we're so accommodation. Because we have had to learn Spanish, Portuguese. Everybody's been here. My great-grandmother's Portuguese. There's all kinds of mixtures. We do not need multiculturalism. What we need here is what you're advocating, a unity of our peoples, which goes back to my eminent Prime Minister, Eric E. Williams, when he said, there can be no Mother Africa, no Mother India, but one Trinidad. And what is being advocated now by Satanist people is multicultural, to get everybody a little bit, and no time to talk about us coming together as one people in terms of promise.
And gentlemen, I'm going to challenge the both of you now.
I'm going to challenge him. He talks about Eric Williams. Your guru, Eric Williams, described us as a hostile and recalcitrant community. That's what your guru said. He didn't regard us as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago.
There have been several statements on both sides.
Yes.
And we can play tons of clips because you're both eminent speakers for either of the groups over the years. There's a clip I want to play now with Mr. Maharaj and the doctors versus steel pans, because we've played a clip with Professor Kudra a while ago. And hopefully we can get past this discussion and the name and the finger pointing, which we seem to have been mired in for so long. Let's play that clip and come back and continue our discussion.